Welcome to the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast on YouTube. My name is Carey Nieuwhof, and my goal is to help you lead like never before. So what I do every week is I sit down with world-class leaders and church leaders, business leaders, and I talk to them about what made them who they are and try to have the conversation with them that you would have if you got to sit down for lunch with them or have dinner with them or really got to spend some time with them. So we go into the backstory and we explore what made them who they are and some of the principles they've learned along the way. So if you enjoy this episode, I would love for you to like it, to subscribe, and also to share it with your friends. And in the meantime, here's today's episode. Bryan, welcome back. It's so good to have you. And I always love catching up with you, and it's good to catch up publicly once in a while too.
It is so good to be here, Carey. I love our conversations.
Yeah, they're always rich. They're always real. And you have the honor of being my last in-person trip. I've not traveled in months. Right. And it was actually in that room where I stayed, where you're recording this, for those of you who are watching on YouTube. That's the guest room / office at the Miles home.
Murphy bed is right behind me in that wall. So that's too cool. That's right. I remember us going on a run and joking about, like, what's this COVID thing?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, do you think it's going to be a thing? And then the world just like, plane landed the next day and it was over.
I think that was a Tuesday morning that we were like, I don't know. We did a workout, and then it was like Thursday, the world had come to a complete stop.
That's a week we'll be talking about a decade from now, right? Where were you when? And so I was with the Mileses, which was awesome. And it was a great conversation. But, you own multiple businesses. And I would love just to start with talking about you, because we're going to talk a lot about virtual businesses and virtual teams. But you kind of were a pioneer in that area. And so what did the crisis of 2020 teach you about running a business? Not just a remote business, but a business period, because this has been like, a neck breaker for so many organizations, churches, small businesses, restaurants. You own a restaurant, well, so to speak, a brewery.
Yeah.
So what does this teach you about running a business, Bryan?
Well, both my wife and I have been very fortunate to find great people that lead those businesses. But I would tell you, one of the things I learned through witnessing how we operated against where we saw other businesses operate is that we chose to cut quick and fast and really be brutally honest with what we thought we were going to be up against. And we didn't wait and go, well, maybe it might. There was none of that. It was just, let's cut quick and do that. And I'm really happy with that decision now, a quarter later, because it enabled us to course correct in our businesses the things where we felt like we would have a material impact. Whereas I saw other businesses that kind of did a death by 1,000 cuts. And what we did was we just took a day and we brought the hammer down. And we just said, here's what needs to happen. Here's the things we need to see in this business or businesses. And our teams and our leaders did an incredible job to kind of see that, because they realized that there might be a lot at stake. Now, 90 days later, the impact to our businesses, fortunately, hasn't been as significant as what we thought. But I saw the businesses that waited and how they kind of were just very painful and how they navigated that. And some didn't have budgets. I mean, we work with some small businesses that didn't have budgets, so they didn't even know where their money was to begin with. I think it exposed a lot of, the underbelly of a lot of businesses that weren't planning or didn't have a tight grip on their finance. But that was one thing I was just really incredibly proud of with our teams, is they cut quick, they cut decisively, they communicated well, they over-communicated in some cases. And, fortunately for us, we didn't lose anybody. We kept everybody on our team.
So you didn't cut staff necessarily. That wasn't your first cut.
We kept every single W-2 employee of ours across our companies. And in some cases, that was incredibly expensive to do that. But it was the right thing to do. And I'm super happy with that. We also, PPP, which, in the States was offered for, the payroll protection stuff. We took that in one instance and we did not in another. Just because there's just varying factors against each business. But it was an interesting time. The other thing too is that crisis really reveals a lot inside teams, my job and Shannon's job as kind of owners of these companies is to be a support role to the CEOs or to the key leaders in those businesses and say, hey, your job is now. And your job is to, reassure people through this really hard time that we're going to get through it. And what can I do to serve you? What do you need from me? How can I help you? And that was really just a good galvanizing moment for between an owner of a business and a really kind of a runner of a business.
So it's interesting to me because sometimes when nobody knew what was going to happen back in March, but this is good lesson to the file, right? Like you got a note to file. It's like, this could happen again. What do you do? And there were some businesses who needed to cut. It's like, oh my gosh, we have a week in the bank. If we don't cut, we're dead by Friday kind of thing. Churches too, that are operating on no margin. But you were a reasonably profitable businesses. You could have called it a very different way. What went into your decision making, or even that instinct that said, "No, we're gonna get lean immediately"?
I don't think we've ever been bloated in terms of business, and I think that this was a great excuse for a lot of bloated organizations to do some cuts. And I recognize when I say that's people's lives and their jobs in some cases. It's not all just marketing expense or whatever. That there are jobs tied to that, so I'm not insensitive to that. But let's just be honest. There are certain companies that were bloated on staffs. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That was not the case with our companies. We run pretty lean in general. I've always believed if you have a successful business long term, it needs to generate a certain level of profit that you can enjoy year over year. And you can create predictability around your profit, because ultimately as a business owner, you pay tax on your profit. It has nothing to do with your revenue. And so we've just said, as a business matures and it gets to a certain place, here's what's non-negotiable is we'll enjoy a certain amount of profit and you will budget for that. And so when you back off on revenue, that means you have to account for the expense connected to it, which equals the profit that you expect. And it's not a fun exercise. I've been the recipient of having to slash P&Ls before. So I have quite a bit of sensitivity to how it affects staffs, but also how it affects the leaders that have to go through those decisions. And then there's certain things too, like there's, hey, you can cut X, Y, and Z, but this one thing, don't touch it, because we know it's detrimental to the business if you do that. So it's really a surgical experience, to go through it. It's not just a chainsaw and cut away. It's, you're really making finite cuts to make sure that the business isn't materially impacted long term.
Why did you make the decision not to cut staff right away? Because a lot of people did, and maybe underneath that is, what did you realize? Wow, if we cut that, we're cutting into an artery. Like, what would be an example of, wow, that's the last thing we cut kind of thing in your businesses?
Yeah. So the first part, why we didn't cut staff, was because we weren't bloated. We have a lot of intentionality around each role in our companies, and you really have to justify adding a role to our company or companies. And there's a process that we've created that says this role is required or needed, not this is a nice to have job. It's so we work really hard not to run companies that are bloated with people. So I didn't have a worry there. Where I got concerned a little bit was some of the projections coming back when we were looking at cuts. We're like, okay, well, we could, and it was a big unknown, right? It was like, okay, well, we could lose 10% of our business, or we could lose 80% of our business. Where do we land on that decision? And no one knew. And it was just a very tenuous time for, I'd say, 3 weeks, starting about the time we went on our run. About 3 weeks after that, I didn't sleep much because I didn't know where the floor was on this experience and how businesses would react. Because at Belay specifically, we work with a lot of smaller organizations.
Yep.
Them don't have the financial wherewithal to kind of weather a storm like that, whether they're for profit or non. But for me, I just, we got to a place where we realized, we think we've hit the basement of where we're at. Unfortunately, it wasn't as bad as what we thought. But the people side of it, for me, just kind of like, well, we need to definitely do our very best to hold on to our team, because if we do see our way through that, which we have, we want to come out of this stronger, and we want to get market share through this, and we want to grow, and we want to accelerate. And so we had them do things like, maybe their job was to do one thing. Well, maybe that job got paused because there was no work in that area. So they looked at a different part of the business and said, hey, for the next 2 months, can you do this inside our company? Or, hey, we need to clean up these files, or we need to do this thing. It was really cool to watch everybody kind of jump in and do different things for a season at a time until like their area or their department kind of got resurrected through the business growing again.
Here's an interesting question for you, and then I want to drill into leading virtual teams and culture, which you've literally written a book on. And I know we've talked about that before on the podcast, but all of a sudden it's like, something that sounded like Star Trek to a lot of leaders 2 years ago feels very much like today in leading virtual teams. But in your hiring process, Bryan, people sometimes talk about hiring the position or hiring a person. And I'd love to know, I lean toward hiring people. If I find a really good person, not to get a bloated staff or whatever, but it's like kind of hiring the person, because then if that role shifts, or like, for example, I have a travel coordinator that we hired through Belay, through you guys. And when my travel went away, I said to her, there's probably not going to be a whole lot of work here for you, because the world shut down. But she's so great that I'm like, we're just going to find new things for you to do. And we did, and it was no problem. Do you want to speak into that, like hiring people versus hiring a position?
Yeah. So for me, where I'm hiring people would be where I'm looking for them to start a new company and they're leading a company. That's very important. You got to really know at a molecular level the people that are going to lead that thing. Beyond that point, it really does become a positional thing. You really have to know that position, regardless of the person or the characteristic, that position is going to add value to a company. My job as an owner of a company is to create greater value from it. And I have to remain objective in that process to say, like, I'm going to add value to this corporation, which means it's a position. And does this create the ROI that's necessary for this thing to continue to thrive and grow and add value? So there is a point where people are obviously incredibly important, and their personalities and all the things kind of wrapped up in who people are. But we don't look at this and go, oh, what a great person. Let's hire them. That only we do that for who we see as a key leader that's going to run a corporation for us. We start that way. Otherwise, it's like, okay, we have an obvious role. We have a very objective look at what that role will do to move the dial in this business. Now let's go find the right person. It's a both and in sense.
It's a good segue. I was going to go there a little bit later, but you have a pretty, I don't know the right adjective, but pretty robust hiring system. So say a little bit about Belay, what you do for virtual staffing. And then you literally, like, you get a boatload of applications every month of people who want to work with your company. And a ridiculously few people get through. And then you hire those people out as virtual assistants, virtual whatever. So give us the elevator pitch for your company, and then tell us about your hiring process.
Yeah. So at Belay, what we find, it's really hard to find great people. And oftentimes when a business owner is looking, or a key leader in a business, they're looking for people, they have what's limited to them in terms of them coming into an office or a geography. And we've completely altered that playing field. So we can bring in a really great high caliber person that's virtual, that can come alongside a team or a person. And that's what we do at Belay. So we do that through 4 core services today, which is virtual assistants, a good executive assistant, if you will, a bookkeeper that can manage payroll, a website support person that manages your website. So you're not paying someone $100,000 a year just to play solitaire. And then the fourth one is our newest line, which is our social media strategist. So these are people that not only know how to execute on the social media, but they also can create the strategy working with your team and embed in your team and kind of execute on the social media side. And so those are the 4 practical ways. We say the word belay. It's a rock climbing term, which means that we're in a support role helping the climber as they climb higher. And that's our job to serve them, to mitigate their risk, to hold the rope for them as they take that risk and they climb higher in their business.
Cool. So talk to us about that hiring process and how many applications would you see in a typical month these days at Belay?
Before COVID, we were about 2,000 a month.
Wow.
We're probably, my guess is 3,000-ish now.
because of
somewhere in there.
unemployment.
So
See it.
we're out of work. It's just that, there's a lot of people hurting in our country right now, that need good work, and they're really qualified people. And words got out too, that we're a legitimate work from home job. Now I just read an article yesterday that said that half of the American workforce right now is working from home.
Yeah. And a lot of that isn't going back. I mean, that's a reset to the economy.
Yeah. Yeah. So specific to the hiring process, without giving away our secret sauce, what I would tell you is that it starts with a robust talent acquisition process where we're looking at things that really matter to us that we've seen by paying stupid tax over 10 years that we don't want to repeat. And then we've refined that process. And so we're asking questions, we're proposing scenarios, we're creating opportunities for them to think critically and demonstrate that back to us in a way that we know that they're competent, connected to being a virtual assistant. Or if you're a bookkeeper, there's certain scenarios we'll throw at a bookkeeper, and then we'll see how they respond, or a website specialist or a social media strategist. So each one's got their own lane in terms of how they get qualified into our business. And they all end up being, for us, 1099s or independent contractors. So they have to come to us with a certain level of experience and proficiency, even kind of to get through the gate of whether we'll interview them on video or not to start with. So it takes about a month right now for if you were a really great person qualified in our country and you had those experiences, for you to literally just get through our process and to be offered an opportunity to join our team. And then from there, you might sit on our bench waiting for your client deployment for another 2 to 3 weeks. So it's because we don't just hope for the best and go, oh, well, you're the next available person. Good luck, work with this person. It's nothing like that, because it's really a solid match on both sides. It's what the client needs and really what that provider of work does as well. They have needs too, that we want to make sure there's a good alignment in terms of personality and work requirement and hours worked and all that stuff that kind of gets matched up there.
What percentage of applicants actually get offered a position at Belay? It's like stupid small, isn't it?
It's actually easier to make it into Harvard than it would be to get hired with us right now. And it's even more so the case percentage-wise. It's way less than 2%.
Yeah. So
98,
99% of the people who apply don't get in.
Yeah, and I know that if you're looking for a job right now, that might sound very discouraging. But if you're a prospect of our business, you're considering a service like ours, that should be very encouraging, because we're able to pick the best of the best that represent us and then also our clients as well.
Well, and I found that too as a user of your services. It's kind of like, okay, I don't have the time for search right now. We're moving pretty fast, but you've pre-vetted thousands of people. And when somebody pops up, it's like, we see this as a potential fit. It's kind of like you did all the hiring process for people. So it's pretty impressive. So
yeah, it has been something that's a long time in the making. It's a 10-year process that, has now really kind of got to a place where we're really happy with it. And then it'll go through iterations. If we have more volume, it'll probably break our system. We'll have to fix it, So it's just very people intense. You are not buying robots.
Right.
We're or artificial intelligence. We are literally working with people, and there's a lot of things we have to look through and engage with them before they ever become a person that can represent our brand and work with one of our clients.
So you've got tens of thousands of leaders right now who are listening, who are in that hiring seat. So they haven't got 3,000 or 4,000 applications a month, but they're looking to fill a position on their team. How would you coach them? What would you say what are a couple of things you're like, guys, nobody talks about this, but pay attention to this? What would you say are some of the things, without giving away your secret sauce, that you would say, I would tell everyone who's hiring to look at these things?
Yeah, well, as you look at kind of the suite of services we offer, I can speak pretty well at that. If you're wanting to hire a CFO,
yeah,
I might not be able to be as clear on that, but I would tell you that obviously you've got to like the person you're working with. There's got to be a likability factor connected to that. But I think that long term, you also want somebody, especially in now's day and age, you really want somebody that communicates responsiveness.
What do you mean by that? Communicates
You might have the greatest CFO on the planet on paper and wonderful experience, but then it takes them 4 days to respond to you. Or you might have the best assistant on paper that's worked with, CEOs all over the country, but if they can't figure out how to respond quickly and thoroughly, then what's the point? Because I think responsiveness is becoming a bigger thing that businesses are looking for, especially now, and because you have to over communicate right now when everybody's working from home. There's no, gosh, I'll just run down to your office and talk to you about this anymore. It's just, and I don't know when that's coming back, to be honest.
Yeah.
So
if
ever. So responsiveness and over communication are things that we're looking for today more than ever before. And you're looking for those things whether you even realize that or not. And over communication is massively important because I can't just assume that because I'm 4 feet away from you, you got it through osmosis. I have to know that you actually got it. So which means on a leader and also with the new employee, you have to be willing to over communicate small, short sentences because that's just the way you are. Doesn't work anymore.
Do you think that is a skill or is that an aptitude? Like, is that something a person either has or doesn't? Because
yeah, that's a great question. I think it's something they have to develop. Some people are naturally gifted at over communicating and they're good communicators and they're responsive just naturally. And I think that other leaders, they just have to kind of grow into that. I really do. And if you want to be a great leader worth following, think about it this way. Think about if you had a team of people and then you just were habitually late to respond to things. What does that say about you? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about that. When you don't respond, you're saying all the wrong things because they're going to fill in the blank waiting for your response. So responsiveness actually matters. And you can't have this ego of like, well, I'll just sit on this for a couple of days because I can. Not in this day and age. Good luck running your business long-term with that mindset. So I'd say, it's incumbent on not only the employee, but also the leader to set the tone for responsiveness and to be very serious about over communicating. People are going to need that right now more than ever.
Oh, that's good. Anything else you would look for in hiring?
When we look at hiring, we're looking, as I shared with you earlier, we create job descriptions that are really clear. So we start with the role and making sure it's going to be the ROI that we need from it. And it is, we say it this way. We say, you're winning in your job and it looks like this, ... We list out the things we think at that point in time are going to be what would be wins to the role. That way we know those wins equal ROI in our business. And having really crystal clear wins connected to each role gives you the ability to have an honest conversation with the candidate or candidates to say, can you help accomplish these wins? Because this is going to be your measuring stick for success in our business. And so I think it goes back to how you set up your job descriptions, that then you can have an honest conversation with candidates that are qualified to say, okay, we think today based on this role, maybe it's a new role, Carey, and maybe it's one of those things where you say like, okay, we think this is it, but 90 days later, we're going to revisit it. Mm-hmm. Or it's been a role in your business that you've had for 4 years and you know that thing's just fine. You could say with a lot of confidence that, hey, this is what winning really looks like in this role because we've seen it now over and over again.
Right.
And then you have a more robust conversation about what it means for them. And what we found is a lot of candidates, especially like say pre-COVID when the job market was so great and everybody had a job, that really helped attract the right people because they knew what the wins were connected to the role, if that makes sense. So
yeah, that's a competitive advantage, right?
Yeah,
in a full employment economy.
So overall, I'd say it's a couple things right now. It's 3 things. It's the responsiveness or how responsive they are. And there's a leader responsibility to that. How well are they willing to communicate and over communicate? And then how will they win? And how are you going to communicate that they win? And can you have a robust conversation around that?
Oh, that's good. I want to talk about virtual teams because you have been doing this literally for a decade. I mean, I don't even think Zoom was around when you launched Belay.
It was not. Yeah, it was like a really expensive WebEx.
I remember WebEx.
We tried Skype. You name it, we've tried it.
And then I've been using Zoom since it was in beta as well. And now the world got introduced to it in 2020. Yeah. One of the things I've heard, you've heard it 1,000 times over, is that virtual teams are weird. They don't really work. You have to have in person. Sure. You can't build culture. And literally you wrote the book on that. But I want to revisit that because I think way more people are listening now than maybe a couple of years ago even. And most of these people are leading some kind of hybrid team who are listening. They got some people in the office, socially distanced. They've got some remote team members. But talk about the dynamics of leading a virtual team, Bryan.
Yeah, so I'd say to all those naysayers pre-COVID, nana boo-boo. It's funny, I totally get that mindset. And I have plenty of friends with great businesses where the office was really an important part of it. And then you talk to them now post-COVID or in the midst of COVID, if you will. I don't think we can say post yet, but through the shock of it at least, a lot of them are admitted to me quietly that they don't even need their office anymore. And here's the thing. I don't think that I had one on people. I just realized if we're going to sell a virtual service in our early days of this business, we had to act like that, which meant that we couldn't have an office. And that if on a sales call, if I had to come see somebody in the early innings of our business, I had to go see somebody to actually sell something, then I was defeating the purpose of our business.
Right. So you can't say you need a virtual assistant, but no, that doesn't work for us. Right. Yeah.
You have to eat your own dog food or whatever cliche you want to throw at it. And so for me, it just became this thing of like, okay, well, we have to remain virtual. And one really big litmus test for us was about 3 years into our business. So this has been 2012, 2013. We felt like we had grown up enough with our business that we went to our 30 employees in Atlanta and we said, hey, here's a survey. We're thinking about getting an office here in Atlanta. And literally every single person said, we don't want an office. This is the whole reason why we came here is because you had a virtual thing and a really great company without an office. We don't want an office. And so we're like, okay, well, then we're going to figure this out for sure. Like it wasn't just because we had matured to a certain point, we needed an office. We were like, we can make this thing happen without an office. So literally from 2010 till now, we've never had an office ever. We're talking from my home office, which is at my house.
Which is your home. Yeah.
We do meet face to face, but we rent large hotels. Well, not right now, but when we could.
Yeah, you'll rent a ballroom, a meeting room. You'll go to a restaurant, whatever.
WeWork or some comparable thing like that, or a restaurant. But we just never had an office. And here's what I came to realize through that experience: is that culture is not an actual office. Culture is not physical location. Culture is shared vision. And now that's what everybody else is starting to see is, okay, what do the hearts of our employees align around? We don't have an office anymore. We don't have the cool ping pong table or the beer fridge or whatever that cool thing was that they had for perks for actually coming to an office, or a really great conference table. What was the thing? Or my awesome cubicle, said no one. They're realizing that the physical space wasn't what attracted people to their business. It was shared vision. It's the shared chase after a dream of what this business could be. And now leaders are having to go back and say, oh, wow, this office was actually for my ego. Or, wow, this thing really had to be here because I thought this is the way people gathered together around an idea. And they're realizing, and I've had so many confidential conversations about how do I get out of my lease? What do I do here? How am I going to communicate to my team we're going all virtual, or we're going to send most people home? It's a lot of conversations. Mm-hmm. And it's been one of those cool things of like, hey, I'm not the expert. I'm only a few years ahead of you, and here's what I've seen, and here's the migration path for how you do that. And here's how I've seen other companies do it. And it's actually been a really great joy to help see business owners, especially, get relief from actually losing their office and the cost connected to it. A profitable company is a healthy company in a lot of instances. And so a lot of their costs connected against their profit was office cost. Mm-hmm. And so that's been actually quite a joy to see.
When you think about the future workforce, do you think that there is, even pre-COVID, I'm sure, but post or, whatever in the new world, that being able to offer flexible work arrangements, even if it's flexible hours, if you do have an office or remote work, becomes a competitive advantage. Can you speak into that a little bit?
I think for employers now, more than ever before, employers are going to be dealing with a situation where employees were forced to go work from home and they figured it out. And I'll let you in on a little secret. Most of them still like it.
Yeah.
The extreme introvert wants to go back and work the extreme extrovert wants to go back and work in an office. Or the business owner who is funding the office that's now empty wants everybody to go back to it. But a lot of people want to work from home.
Mm-hmm.
That is survey after survey that I'm seeing shows that a lot of people are actually enjoying the benefits of working from home. And really, frankly, for a lot of them are being treated like adults for the first time. In the sense of, hey, I trust you to get the result at home. Hey, I expect this result from you and I can't see you. That's what's happening. And I know that that's how it's transferring the connection of employee with employer because of that. So I'd say to employers or to business owners right now, or nonprofits or, senior leaders in churches, right now, more than ever before, you're going to have people that there is an expectation they're not coming back to your office. And new people you want to hire want to at least work from home 50%, if not more. Like if you think that we're going back to the way we were based on every survey I'm seeing, not just one guy's opinion that wrote a book, I'm telling you from the surveys, people want to work from home. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Could be commute. Commute could be a soul-sucking experience for people. It could be that they need flexibility with kids. They may have an aging parent.
Mm-hmm.
They may not enjoy the office experience.
It'll be like you and me. We just love working out of our homes.
Yeah, you're comfortable there. You can produce the result. You're not distracted. And so there's a lot of reasons why now more than before people are discovering what it means to work from home. And a lot of people are just enjoying it.
What are some principles for the leaders who are now leading hybrid or completely virtual teams? What are some of the best practices, the non-negotiables that's like, hey, if you want a high-functioning team, here's some things you could do that'll really, really help?
I think it starts with leadership. And I think that the expectation on your team starts with how you communicate what you value as a leader. And that a lot of that's done through how you operate as a leader. So, for example, we've learned really early on that you need to communicate the why more than the what. This is why this role is important. This is why the thing you do every day is important. This is the why. And so when you're not there, which you're not literally because you're not with them working, if they know the why, all the more they can fill in the blank when you're not around. And I know that that's probably a principle that's obvious, but in a virtual work environment, your employees need to know the why all the more. It might be, hey, here's why this task is important. Here's why this meeting is important. It can get to the granular level. You need to communicate the why connected to so they can really understand it. Because they're not, they just can't walk over to your office and ask you anymore.
Right.
So the why and circling around is very important. Another thing that I would say is that, especially for leaders, is delegating a result, not the task. Think about how cuckoo that would be right now if you had to literally work with somebody and tell them the step-by-step things for every single thing they have to do working from home. You can't do it, right? So you have to find a level of group of people with a competency that can say, here's the result that is expected. Get after it. And if you have any questions, I'm here for you. And instead of just being this micromanager that's like, okay, you do it this next, and you do it this way, and you do it this way. Those days of micromanagement are almost over. In that sense, I don't think that you can micromanage people enough in their first 90 days of employment. That's just leading. You have to teach people how to do their role. But after that, it's really, okay, here's the results expected of you. So
you're an adult, go figure it out, right?
Yeah. And then there's the obvious things that are just going to need to be there, right? You're going to have to provide for high-speed access. You're going to have a great machine. You're going to have the ability to communicate, and that your office is a place that's not distracting. You got lighting, and you understand that. You don't have a giant window behind you. It looks like you're dialing in from heaven. All these things you kind of have to work together, especially for a lot of people that are going home for the first time. They're figuring this stuff out.
I quote you on this all the time, but one of my favorite lines from virtual work culture is simply this, that remote workers aren't lazy, lazy workers are lazy. Do you want to speak into that a little bit? Because that is that idea like, well, Bryan, if I can't see you and, I don't have a camera in your house, like, how do I know you're actually working? And there's that fear that a lot of people have, like, I can only manage what I see. Do you want to speak into that a little bit?
Oh, I'd love to. That's an old holdout from the industrial age. The idea is that you had this manufacturing plant, and on the floor you had your workers, and then you put managers around them. And the idea was that if I can see you, I can control you. And then you look at today's corporate office environment, you put everybody in cubicles and you put managers on the outside walls around them. And so we designed a work environment that is the same thing as a manufacturing plant when Henry Ford was building Model Ts. Yep. So guess what? COVID comes along and completely busts that up and says, that is completely not a relevant thing anymore. And so I have to trust people when I can't see them. You're literally, in some instances, overnight, say January of 2020, you're like, if I can't see you, I can't control you. You're lazy because you want to work from home. So now I'm trusting you to produce a result that benefits our business. And I may not see you for another 3 months.
That's huge.
Significant. And then halfway through that, a lot of business owners are realizing, wow, I really don't need that old manufacturing plant anymore to produce my work or to produce the result that's expected. It's a really interesting time.
It is a really interesting time. And I've found that, having led teams for 25 years, my remote team that I've led for 5 years probably is the best motivated, highest producing team I've ever led, which is really, really fascinating because when you treat people like, and it's not that the other teams were terrible, and I've probably gotten better as a leader as well, hopefully over the last few years. So I'm not throwing any other teams under the bus, but what I am saying is I'm surprised how much you can accomplish with a remote team. Any other best practices? What about defaulting to video? You taught me that, and it's something we practice on our team on a regular basis. Do you want to talk about the importance of video?
Before I do that, let me touch on one thing about the laziness factor. I think that's an old school dogma that was created by business owners to justify having their office. I truly do. Because, and then if they're lazy, then that's your fault as a leader. So I don't know. I've always struggled with that one because we have hardworking people at Belay and in my other companies, and a lot of them, high percentage in the 90s, work from home. And I've never seen laziness as a trait. I think it starts with the leader. So that has always rubbed me the wrong way. So thank you for letting me get that off my chest.
It's such a great point, Bryan. That's why I wanted to go there. And I do hear that. It's like, well, how do I know? I'm like, well, then maybe you just hired a lazy person. And you can listen, there's no problem being lazy in the office. We've all met lazy office workers who haven't done a thing all day, but they've been there for 8 hours, right?
Yeah, just watch The Office Space. That's a great movie for demonstrating that. What would you say you do here all day?
Talk about video, the importance of video. We're all zoomed out. We get that, but it's a moment in time. How do you handle video?
I think, for us at Belay, it's not optional. Like you must be on screen and off mute. That's very important. Now, if you're in a meeting, like we have an all company-wide meeting at Belay and there's 100 employees on it, you'll be on screen, but you'll be on mute because of just the so many people.
Can you explain why those two things? So just so everybody, I think we've all been on Zoom by now, but it's pretty easy. You can turn off your video, you can turn off, and people do that routinely, but you're like, and I have the same rules in my company. It's like, no, if we're in a meeting, your screen's on, and if you get a little bit of background noise, you can mute, but like nobody's doing email. Like you are fully in and you're fully present. Do you want to talk about why that's a non-negotiable for you?
Sure. I think you said it well, but imagine if you and I were to go have a cup of coffee together and I just said, hey, hold on one quick second. And then I dropped a sheet down between the middle of us where you couldn't see me, but we were having that meeting. Like that would be unacceptable, right? Well, somehow we let people do that on Zoom.
You're right.
Like, I'm just going to not be here and I'm going to get the credit for being here. And you're not going to see me while I, check my Instagram account or, fold laundry or whatever the thing is you might be doing. Right. And so that to me communicates I'm not present. And so we just made a decision several years ago that if you're on a Zoom call, you're present. I can see you. Unless there's like something obvious, like maybe a kid needs a Band-Aid or, if there's some, maybe your husband's walking by naked behind you or something, like there's a good reason for it. Otherwise, you're present and ready to go and part of the meeting. And then with regard to the mute thing, mute is the devil when it comes to communication, especially on Zoom, because it stymies robust conversation. And I'd say that that's true of about 10 to 12 people on a Zoom call. Collaboration, you can kind of, today with the technologies it creates such a lively conversation. And if someone says something and you have to go off mute, you're less apt to say it, or you'll be like, yeah, that's what I thought. Versus contributing to it as a leader or contributing to it as an employee because you have a very important thought or you want to contribute to the conversation. So we've just made it clear, and gosh, it's really been a wonderful thing. Hey, when you're on a Zoom call in our company, we see you and you're off mute. It's just not negotiable.
And do you think you can undo that? If someone, I bet you there's a bunch of listeners listening right now who are like, we have a bad culture in that respect. Any advice for them?
I don't think they've had a bad culture. I think it's just you can retrain people for what's expected. I mean, everybody wants a present employee. Every employee wants a present leader, right? And so those are two easy ways to fix that. If you feel like you're not getting engagement on your Zoom calls, maybe ask them to show up on video, or get off the mute. The other thing too that I find fascinating is that there's an element of me sharing my house with you that you don't see otherwise if I just come into the office every day. Like there's an element of who I am in my house that translates to your connectivity and your depth of relationship with your business coworker, because you can see and peer into their home, even just a little bit, not the whole house, but there's just an element of that I think that's really special. And I've been told this by several people, is that they actually feel like right now during COVID, they're actually meaningfully connecting deeper with their coworkers because of that element. And because they're not all done up, they're not all gussied up, and they don't have all their makeup on. And, they're coming to work professional on screen, but they're just more human. They got the sniffles.
Your dry cleaning bill dropped significantly with COVID, right?
Or your cat walks behind you. You're showing them a piece of who you are in some way, shape, or form. So there's an authenticity element to this that I'm fascinated by.
Yeah. Patrick Lencioni, who was recently on the podcast, said exactly the same thing. So for the record, and he was very public with this, he was opposed to remote teams and the whole deal. And now is like, whoa, I was totally wrong about that. And he said they're more personal because people are in their homes. Yeah. Do you have any guidelines, whether that is with your staff, which is probably pushing 100 people right now, or all of the workforce that you have at Belay? You talked about like computer, lights, camera, that kind of thing, right? So you got to have decent technology. But any guidelines on home offices, like what are some minimal viable criteria or distraction-free workplaces? Any thoughts on that or best practices?
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, beyond the tech element, which is obviously highly important, is having a dedicated workspace. Probably the place where you write your checks with your checkbook is not going to be the place where you need to actually have a conversation and to collaborate with team members. You need a 50 to 100 square feet somewhere in your house to do that. That's one thing that I hear with leaders is like they're realizing that a lot of people had this in their house already. That was already square foot that, they don't have to go get for an actual physical office anymore because they realized in these homes, there's 50 to 100 square feet already. And so I'd say you need to have a dedicated office space. You need to have it when you walk into it, you need to feel like you're productive, so you shouldn't have like your gym socks on the floor or, that big bottle of, whiskey over there, like just make it a room that you feel like I can be productive in it.
Yeah.
Good lighting, daylight's very important for productivity. There's a lot of surveys around daylight and how it increases productivity for employees. Sound actually matters. If you're in a basement and it travels or it echoes, that's going to show up on the screen. Like we talked about the window, but there is very important things in terms of like where your camera is connected to it. And then I've seen a lot of parents do this, which I love, is that they kind of created a board on the outside of their door that says, okay, when it's green, you can come in and interrupt me. When it's yellow, it better be really serious that you need to talk to me about something. And red is, I'm on a call or I'm on a web call. Do not distract me.
Yeah.
And so they put there, there's just really practical things like that I've seen parents do that just really kind of help create a good, sound work environment from home.
That's good, man. Oh man, I can't believe how the time is flying, Bryan. And any other thoughts on virtual teams? I had so many other places we want to go, but that's why we'll have to have you back, as always. Any other thoughts for leaders as we move into this new era? Because one of my hearts behind this interview was to get them ready to really lead their teams into the future.
Yeah. I'd say, being a good steward of your organization or the leadership position that's you've been entrusted with has a lot to do with how you're working with your employees right now in this mess. And it has a lot to do with where they work in general. And so you can reactively deal with COVID and what it means, or you can proactively get after this and say, what is this saying about my workforce? What is this saying about where we operate and how we are productive? What is this saying about me and my leaders in terms of how they're communicating? And really looking at it and saying, okay, how can we emerge stronger out of this experience versus just reacting to it, hoping we get through it? Because I honestly believe that this has fundamentally changed the way people will operate from a business standpoint. I really do. And in terms of office space, one of the worst jobs you can have right now is a commercial real estate broker. Sorry if you are.
Sorry for them. I hear you.
But you're going to be negotiating leases for 50% what you thought, and you're going to have a lot of people jumping their leases, and there's just a lot going at the commercial real estate space, I think. We already seen evidence of it in Atlanta. But all that said, I think that you can look at this as a leader and just say, okay, how can I convert this reactive approach maybe I've been postured with because this thing kind of came out of nowhere to how can I proactively, dynamically, wonderfully make my team that much more productive and connected against what we're doing? And how can I align their heart towards the mission of this business or the values of this business versus just thinking it's some office that they get to come to every day?
So I'm with you 100% on the fundamental change to the culture. But almost every day on social media or via email or in some way, I hear some variation of this. Hey, really appreciate all your thoughts about the future. But as soon as this COVID thing is done and the risk is gone, like we're just going back to the in-person office and we're going back to in-person church and we're going back to the way it used to be. So thanks for all your polite little views, Bryan. We like you. We don't dislike you, but not listening to you because it's going back to normal. Yep. What would you say to that leader? What is the cautionary tale you would say now?
I would say that is great that you have that perspective. Everybody else has a differing opinion on that. I know because I have been pulled into conversations with corporations where their leaders have said, when this stuff blows over, get your butts back to the office.
Yeah.
And you know what those people are doing? They're going to go and they're going to resent that. And they're going to be looking for somewhere else to work. And here's the thing. I think honestly, as a business owner, don't you want people that are connected to what you're doing and are productive because they're connected to the heart of the organization? I mean, you can have that now more than ever before by just showing them, I trust you, go work from home. And I think that that's going to be missed. I think there are going to be some leaders that are going to really shoot themselves in the foot because they're going to insist that they come back to an office because they've spent all this money on this office space and they've created and justified every reason why they have to have an office. And they're going to force people to come back to it. and they're going to go back to that soul-sucking commute. They're going to go back to a place where they feel like they're being controlled and not trusted. And they're going to leave because for the last 3 months plus, they've been able to work from home and they like it. And, they may have missed the camaraderie a little bit. They may have missed like that lunch hour get together or the office, like the office party or whatever that thing might be. But for the most part, they've really enjoyed working from home. And I think that leaders really need to, and I'm seeing this, this is not theory. I'm literally getting pulled into conversations of, oh my gosh, I think you're going to have to abandon our office. Our employees are telling us they love it too much. So you're putting your head in the sand to not address this. Now, I do believe that it might be a hybrid. I do think that there's certain instances where there's certain roles have to come into an office. Mm-hmm. I don't know what those would be, but I know that they're there. I think that, you're still going to have to come into an office for meetings and, certain things if you're collaborating. I think there's legitimate reasons why people will still want to come together face to face.
But it's also possible, like virtual businesses work. You run one, I run one. Yeah. Like we're both, for those of you watching, we're both at world headquarters, my basement and the upper floor of the outbuilding at your place, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's completely possible. I just encourage leaders that are kind of like, hey, let's get everybody back together to just take 1 second and survey their team at least. Hey, honestly, tell me, team, what are you thinking right now? And I think they're going to be surprised by the result if they honestly look at that data.
Well, Bryan, you've helped a lot of leaders today. People probably want to learn more. So it's belaysolutions, right? .com.
belaysolutions.com. And that's the best place to learn about our services. Separate from that, my wife and I created an organization to help business owners own their companies, not run them. And that's at ownnotrun.com. And I'm pretty active on Instagram currently.
You are? Bryan Miles. On it with a Y. And if you're in the Atlanta area, tell them about Nofo Brew Co.
Oh, yeah. So we created this awesome brewery on the north side of Atlanta called Nofo Brew Co. And if you're ever around, please come on in and grab a beverage. We're really proud of that experience. We created a really unique environment for the folks that live in this area with really great tasting beers.
There you go. All right. Well, we'll do it again because, I can't believe we filled the full hour just on virtual teams and catching up. But as always, what's that?
It's pretty relevant right now.
It's very relevant. Bryan, you helped a lot of leaders. Thank you so much. And really appreciate you.
Thank you, Carey, for the opportunity. I appreciate you very much too.
Well, I hope today's episode was helpful to you. You can always get more by subscribing to my channel. I also have a lot more content over at CareyNieuwhof.com for leaders in business and leaders in churches. And you can get transcripts of this episode there and so much more, plus some other stuff I do for leaders. So head on over there to discover more at CareyNieuwhof.com. And in the meantime, I really hope our time together today has helped you lead like never before.